A former Trump administration ambassador is currently prevented from leaving South Korea, and now the U.S. State Department says it is following his case. Could this dispute become a serious diplomatic issue between Washington and Seoul? And could the controversy eventually draw American attention to the questions Morris Tan has raised about President Lee Jae-myung and the so-called Andong case? Let's separate what we know from what remains speculation. Morris Tan is a Korean-American legal scholar who served as a United States ambassador at large for global criminal justice during President Donald Trump's first administration. He is not a current Trump admin official, but he is a former Senate-confirmed American ambassador who worked on international criminal justice, human rights, and accountability. Tan traveled to South Korea in late May, saying that he intended to observe the country's local elections and examine allegations of election irregularities. But shortly after his arrival, South Korean authorities sought an exit ban against him. That means Tan was allowed to enter South Korea, but was then legally prevented from leaving. South Korean police said the restriction was necessary because Tan had failed to comply with a summons and might leave the country before their investigation was completed. The case centers on highly explosive statements Tan made in Washington, D.C. Tan publicly repeated allegations that President Lee Jae-myung had been involved in a serious crime as a teenager and had been sent to juvenile detention. South Korean authorities say those allegations are false. Police initially concluded that they lacked the authority to prosecute the case because Tan is an American citizen and the relevant statements were made in the United States. But prosecutors ordered the investigation reopened. Their legal argument was that even though the statements were made in Washington, the alleged harm was felt in South Korea because President Lee resides there. Tan was subsequently indicted on criminal defamation charges. His first trial hearing is reportedly scheduled for September 11th. This creates a significant legal and diplomatic question. Should a foreign government be able to prosecute an American citizen for political speech delivered on American soil? South Korea has every right to enforce its laws within its own jurisdiction. Being a former American ambassador does not place Morris Tan above the law. But the United States also has a legitimate interest in protecting the rights of an American citizen, especially when the disputed speech occurred inside the United States. That is why the State Department's response matters. According to a statement provided to American media, the State Department said the United States is following the case. A department spokesperson also said the Trump administration has no higher priority than the safety and security of Americans. The spokesperson added that the department takes serious concerns that American citizens may be subjected to exit bans without a fair and transparent process for resolving them. That is not the same as a formal diplomatic protest. The State Department has not announced sanctions, demanded Tan's immediate release, or accused the South Korean government of violating international law. The White House has also not announced direct intervention in the case. But Washington is clearly aware of what is happening, and if Tan's exit restriction continues, or if South Korean authorities seek his arrest, this could become much more than a domestic defamation case. It could become a test of free speech, extraterritorial jurisdiction, and the treatment of American citizens by a major U.S. ally. Tan has described the prosecution as lawfare. He argues that South Korea should have no jurisdiction over remarks made in Washington that his speech would receive broad constitutional protection under American law. South Korean authorities take the opposite position. They maintain that the accusations were false, that the damage occurred inside South Korea, and that the case is proceeding according to Korean law. But there is another dimension to this controversy. Tan says he has obtained additional material supporting his position. He has also raised questions connected to a body discovered in the Andong reservoir. According to Korean reporting, a school official who disappeared in 2010 was found dead in the reservoir years later. The body had reportedly been preserved under unusual underwater conditions. South Korean police concluded that there was no evidence of criminal activity and closed the case. Tan and others have nevertheless raised questions about the circumstances surrounding that death and about whether it has any connection to claims involving Lee Jae-myung's past. That distinction is critical. An allegation is not proof. A question is not a criminal finding. And Tan's former position in the United States government does not automatically make every statement he makes accurate. If Tan possesses substantial new evidence, he should present evidence that can be independently examined. At the same time, trying to resolve disputed political claims primarily through exit bans and criminal prosecution can create the opposite effect. Instead of making the controversy disappear, it can internationalize it. If the State Department becomes more directly involved, American officials will need to understand why Tan is being prosecuted and why he is being prevented from returning home. That review would naturally include the content of his statements and the evidence he claims to possess. Does that mean the State Department is investigating the Andong Dam case? No. There has been no announcement of any American investigation into the dam, the recovered body, or Tan's allegations concerning President Lee. The Andong Dam case remains a matter for South Korean authorities. But if Washington begins examining the broader circumstances behind Tan's prosecution, the issues and materials underlying his statements could enter the American government's field of view. That is a real possibility. Not that American agents are suddenly going to conduct a criminal investigation at Andong Dam, but that the allegations may receive greater international scrutiny because of how South Korea has handled Tan. This may prove to be a major strategic mistake for the Lee administration. If the allegations are demonstrably false, the most persuasive response would be transparent evidence. Authorities could explain the investigative record, the forensic findings, the circumstances in which the body was discovered, and the reasons police found no evidence of a crime. Tan's claims should also face serious scrutiny. If he cannot substantiate them, that should be made clear. But preventing a former American ambassador from leaving the country inevitably raises questions that extend beyond the original allegations. Was a restriction necessary and proportionate? Was Tan provided with a fair and transparent process? Can South Korea claim criminal jurisdiction over political speech delivered in Washington? And would the same legal theory be acceptable if another country prosecuted a South Korean citizen for remarks made in Seoul? Those are questions the U.S. government may eventually have to confront. For now, the facts are these. Morris Tan has been indicted in South Korea. He has been subjected to repeated exit restrictions. The State Department says it is following the case and takes concerns about unfair exit bans seriously. But neither the State Department nor the White House has announced an investigation into the Andong Dam allegations. So the question is not whether Washington has already launched such an investigation. The question is whether South Korea's treatment of Morris Tan will eventually force Washington to become more directly involved, and whether that involvement will bring even greater attention to the allegations the Korean government apparently wanted to contain. By stopping Morris Tan from leaving, did South Korean authorities protect the integrity of their legal system? Or did they transform a controversial allegation into an international free speech and diplomatic dispute? That story is still developing, and Washington is now watching.